Of course, so much of our attention has been there in Washington, D.C., as Senate Democrats and the White House are now in intensive negotiations over how to avert an extended partial shutdown of the federal government that's set to start early Saturday morning. The two sides have not yet reached an agreement. And in fact, a test vote on funding failed a bit earlier today. I want to put up this tweet that we have there from Fox News detailing what we're seeing there. The Senate test votes fails 45 to 55 as 7 Republicans vote no. And so we do know that Senate Democrats, led by Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, have committed to staying united in voting no on any bill that funds the Department of Homeland Security under the current language that's listed in the bill. And on the other side of the aisle, as we see there are Republicans who are choosing to join them. So to talk a lot more about this, I want to bring in one of those Republicans, Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson. Thanks so much for being with us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, let's start with the very basics. Earlier today, we just put up the tweet from Fox News. There was a test vote that failed. You were one of 7 Republicans who decided to mark in the nay category. I would like you to take some time now to explain what led you to that decision.
Well, there's a host of reasons, but I think just in general, I'm disgusted by this process. I've been here 15 years now. We should have passed 180 appropriation bills before the beginning of the fiscal year in which they're going to fund. We've passed 6. That's a 96.7% failure rate. As a result, I think it's time to shift the paradigm here and eliminate shutdowns for all time. So I've as Chairman of Homeland Security back in, I think, 2018, 2019, I passed out of my committee a bill called Preventing Government Shutdowns. I have an even simpler bill that we did vote on, the Eliminate Shutdown Act. Unfortunately, all the Democrats voted against that. In the midst of the shutdown, I proposed, and we voted on it twice, every Republican senator voted for this, the Shutdown Fairness Act, which just pays people for shutdowns. So again, none of those bills were included in the House packages. When I think if you would have included the Shutdown Fairness Act, since I have 17 unions supporting it, I don't think Democrats could have objected to having that included in a House bill, but it wasn't. So here we are. A couple days before the government runs out of funding, we're being threatened shutdowns again. And this is exactly what the uniparty appropriators want. They want that threat of shutdowns so that they can pass appropriation bills that we, by and large, can't afford. The other problem with this one is, we have a resolution in the Republican conference of the Senate to not engage in earmarking. Now, that was a big debate when I got here in 2011 between Jim Inhofe and Tom Coburn of Oklahoma. Senator Inhofe made some good points. Can't let the administration make all the spending decisions. But Senator Coburn, I think, won the day on that one, said, yeah, but earmarks are the gateway drug. And we were $14 trillion in debt when I came here. Now we're approaching $39 trillion. Something is completely whacked out here. Something is completely out of control. And earmarks are that gateway drug. It's probably the only reason, though, that these bills are going to pass. So what I was requiring is serious consideration and passage of the Shutdown Fairness Act, and even better yet, the Eliminate Shutdown Act. None of those is included, but what is included is about $14.3 billion of earmarks. The ranking member of the Senate Appropriation Committee has over $500 million in earmarks alone. Now the 3 or 4 senators have over $400 billion. I mean, that is grotesque. It's, again, the gateway drug. It's one of the reasons we're approaching $39 trillion in debt and mortgaging our children's future.
And so as we're talking a lot more about this potential shutdown, partial shutdown, even when folks at home, fellow Americans, they hear the word shutdown, it does strike fear in their hearts, especially after the year we had last year where several folks weren't getting paid for that period of time that the government was not running. So is there anything that you're able to see here other than, of course, your proposed bill that would eliminate the factor of a shutdown, but something that would bridge the gap between the two parties in order to get some sort of funding bill ultimately passed?
Yes, spend more money. That's what's going to happen. We will spend more money. We're going to spend money we can't afford and further mortgage our children's future. That's why we're close to $39 trillion in debt. This isn't working. We need a paradigm shift. But again, the uniparty appropriators don't want that. They want to keep spending money. Again, $14.3 billion of earmarks. One member, the appropriations ranking member, over $500 million in earmarks just in these spending packages. Again, it's completely out of control. And I just refuse to be part of that process.
And so I want to shift our focus also here to something that Senator Lindsey Graham said, as the Democrats once again are focusing a lot on the funding that has to do with the Department of Homeland Security. But again, on the Republican side, Senator Graham pushed this up on his social media to say to my Democrat colleagues, if you want to change the DHS bill to put your restrictions on ICE to align them more with the traditional law enforcement agencies, then I believe it would be right for me to insist that we get to the root cause of the problem, which would be ending the sanctuary city policies. Therefore, I want to put my Senate colleagues on notice that I would insist this new DHS package, including ending sanctuary city policies forever, which is something the American people overwhelmingly support. And we're pulling this up from your own social media as well. You had this in response to the Senator Lindsey Graham saying he is absolutely correct. Sanctuary cities and states are a disaster. I'd like to expound on this a little bit and hear it from yourself here in a statement as to what you would like to see ultimately change with these quote unquote sanctuary cities.
Well, first of all, the root cause of the problem right now is the President Obama and then President Biden's open border policies, particularly President Biden, allowing millions of people to flood in this country, including those millions are criminals. I mean, hardened criminals, members of violent street gangs, transnational criminal organizations, drug traffickers, human traffickers, sex traffickers, murderers, rapists, okay? That is what we're trying to clean up that mess. And unfortunately, we have sanctuary states and cities who aren't cooperating with ICE, and even worse, they are resisting them. The lieutenant governor of Minnesota was involved in managing a signal chat group that was deploying their activists to obstruct justice, putting their supporters at risk, costing two of their supporters their lives because they obstructed justice. Again, those are tragedies. But again, what are also tragedies are the deaths of Laken Riley and Rachel Morin and many, 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 many other victims of the murders and rapes of crimes committed by illegal immigrants. So again, the root cause is the open border. Sanctuary cities facilitate the type of violence that we saw the tragic deaths of their own activists.
And so as you're talking about those two deaths, Renee Good, Alex Preddy, happening in the state of Minnesota, I have to ask you, we do know that the president has come out and said that he would like an investigation to happen. Of course, some of those state leaders are saying they want an independent investigation into those deaths. Do you have a response to this?
All for an independent investigation, but I have to say I've got a great deal of sympathy with ICE officers. I mean, they are being threatened, they're being doxxed, they're being shot at. A couple of illegal immigrants were inadvertently killed as some of the activists were shooting at ICE officers. They've had their vehicles rammed by some of these peaceful protesters, these activists. They've had rocks and bricks thrown. So if you're engaged in a legal enforcement action, you're an ICE officer, now in Minneapolis, you're gonna be surrounded by leftist activists who've been trained to obstruct justice. You don't know what kind of weapons they may be brandishing, so you are on hair trigger alert. So again, the only reason those two individuals are dead is because they were activists, they were deployed to scenes, putting them in danger, putting them at risk, and they lost their lives tragically. But now the left has two martyrs that they are using now to try and reduce the authority of DHS to, again, keep America safer and secure and try and clean up the enormous mess of the open borders of the Biden administration.
And speaking of the Department of Homeland Security, there are now folks on both sides of the aisles now asking for Secretary Noem to either step down or calling for her impeachment. I want to put this up. It's a tweet that we have from Politico. This includes senators like Tom Tillis saying that Noem should, quote, be out of a job. Again, the conversation around immigration, what's happening there in Minnesota, and ultimately leading up to the president's cabinet is going to continue. I have to ask you here, what's your formal sort of response to these calls for Noem's impeachment?
That's completely up to the president of the United States to make a decision who he wants to serve in his administration. I'll leave him to make that call.
All right, so we certainly appreciate Senator Ron Johnson, Republican from Wisconsin, for joining us here on Live Now from Fox as we're looking ahead to a potential partial government shutdown, also detailing some of the actions that have been happening in Minnesota. Thanks so much for your time.
Have a great day.